let's go through the history of the English language, shall we? English, to start off, is a Germanic language. Take a look at this map. The green parts, that will show you the languages of Europe that are Germanic, which includes German, of course, and Dutch and Scandinavian languages. While in the yellow, you can see Romance languages like French, Italian, and Spanish. I want you to keep that in mind for a little later. There are Germanic languages and Romance languages in Western Europe today. Celtic languages, by the way, which you can tell by the map, include Gaelic, that's actually Scottish language, and Welsh and Irish. And they existed before English. However, in case you're wondering, Stonehenge is older than Celtic and the Celts. They didn't build it. The Romans, they fought Celtic tribes and they conquered what is today England and the Celtic tribes in England, but they didn't conquer Scotland. Here's what you need to know. The Germanic Anglo-Saxons from modern-day Denmark and northern Germany arrived in England in the 500s. That's after the Roman period and the beginning of what we call the medieval period. And so they really founded England and what was to become English. Okay, a picture of a ceremonial mask from the Anglo-Saxon period. Their language was called Anglisk, and that we call it Old English. And here's the Lord's Prayer written in Old English, and I'll just give you a taste of what it's like here by reading it with a Scandinavian accent. Fader ore, thote arton hjofnom, sidi namage helgod, tu bekommet din rike, geworde din villa on jordan swaswa on hjofnom. So it really sounds like modern Scandinavian. If I'm to read it in modern-day Norwegian, you'll see the Lord's Prayer goes like this. Fader vår, du som i himlen, ditt navn være hellig, må ditt rike komme, må din vilje skje på jorden sånn som i himlen. It is a very Germanic language. The Kingdom of England was founded in 927, by the way, by the Anglo-Saxons, but English language was also affected a little bit by the Viking invaders of the same period. Here's a map showing you the Viking encounter with the English. But what I'm going to ask you now is English really a Germanic language, or is it a Romance language? Remember from before, Romance languages include French and Italian and Spanish. So here's the deal. The Norman invasion of 1066 by William the Conqueror, who was Duke of Normandy, this part of France here called Normandy, still called Normandy today, he and his pals, basically, they invaded and conquered England, and they ended up changing a lot of the language. The English ruling class, spoke Norman because there were Normans throughout the Middle Ages. Basically, Norman was kind of a French language then. The influx of Norman had enormous consequences for English. Today, only 26% of the English vocabulary is Germanic, but more than 50% is Romance, which you can tell here by this stat, that these stats, that it's Latin and French. Together, of course, Romance languages. I'll give you some examples here. The Norwegian, this is Norwegian for year. It's år, and the German jaar. And so the English year, of course. But here's Norwegian word århundre, the German jahrhundert, but the English is century. So really, the English word for century should have been year hundred, because that's what it is in Norwegian and German, and yet it's century, which is directly taken from Latin. It's not Germanic. Here's some other words. Norwegian fordel, German Vorteil, you're wondering what this means. Dutch voordeel, the English advantage. So these are the Norwegian, German, and Dutch words for advantage. Look nothing like the English word, and yet the French is avantage, and the Italian vantaggio. So basically, in many instances, English has more in common with Romance languages than it does with the other Germanic languages of Europe. My point here is it's still a Germanic language because most of the more basic words are of Germanic origin and the grammar is Germanic, but it has major Latin and French influences. So it is, by this account, more than 50% Romance and not Germanic. From Old English to Modern English, Old English is, like I told you before, Anglo-Saxon language really existed from the 500s, the Anglo-Saxons when they came over, until 1066, the Norman invasion. And then Middle English, from the period between the Norman invasion and 1500, that's the English spoken by commoners. Basically, it changed a little bit. While the aristocracy, the ruling class, they spoke Norman, which was almost a French language, until the 1400s, before they changed over to English. The great vowel change is interesting because the pronunciation of words changed while spelling was already being standardized. And that's why the many words in English are not pronounced the way you would logically think they would be pronounced based on how they are written. So, for instance, actually, basically, Middle English before the great vowel change would have pronounced the word bite, beat, and meat, met, and out, oot. So the vowels changed after the spelling was standardized, or during the standardization of the spelling. Early Modern English, that's after Middle English now, it was the language of William Shakespeare and Elizabeth I at that time period. And this really forms the basis of modern day English, modern English. Non-rhotic pronunciation, that's not pronouncing the R in syllable final position. The British don't do that generally, the English. It didn't become common until the early 19th century. So actually in the time of William Shakespeare, most of the R's would be pronounced, just like in modern day American English. A little bit about the spread of English here. English spread, first of all, to Scotland already in the Norman period through cultural influence and some political alliance between the monarchs of England and Scotland, and also, of course, migration. A lot of English traders moved to Scotland and took their language with them. So Scotland actually started speaking English without being conquered, which is a different story for Wales and Ireland. They were gradually conquered by England in the Middle Ages. By the way, flags here. This is the Welsh flag, this is the modern-day Irish flag, and this is the St. Patrick's flag used by Northern Ireland previously, and Ireland in the 19th century. Scotland and England, by the way, merged to form the Kingdom of Great Britain in 1707. That's when Scotland ceased being a separate kingdom. England ceased being a separate kingdom in 1707. English colonists settled in North America from the early 1600s, and slaves, of course, were brought from Africa. This basically says a lot about the demographic makeup of Northern America. And this map will show you the British Empire in the year 1754, and you can tell they have territories on several continents and spread the English language to those places. In 1822, that's when Australia and New Zealand were included, by that time at least. In 1919, this is the map that shows you the British Empire at its greatest extent, at its largest. And here's a diachronic map that will show you colonies they had not at the same time, but all of the colonies they ever had. And you can see how massive it was. And these are basically all of the places where English was spread to, and where you can find native speakers of English today. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and catch my other videos if you haven't already.